Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a sew along for my new spring pattern, Simplicity 9480. I love this jumpsuit. I'm going to be using this beautiful rayon print fabric from Melanated Fabrics, of course. I will put the link in the description box below. It's beautiful. I am so ready for spring, so let's do this. So you're gonna need pattern 9480. Remember that the back of the envelope gives you fabric suggestions along with yardage and notions that you might need, for example, a button and elastic. Let's go over the pattern pieces you're gonna need to cut. You're gonna need pattern piece number 9. This is the front and back casing. You're gonna need to cut 4. You're gonna cut pattern piece number 6. This is the front pant leg. You're gonna cut 2. You're gonna need pattern piece number 7, which is the back of our pant leg, and you're going to need 2. You're gonna cut out pattern piece number 8. This is our pocket, and you're gonna cut 4. You're gonna cut pattern piece number 4. This is the yoke front and back. You're going to cut 4 and interface 4. Now here's just a note. Depending on the weight of your fabric, you may or may not want this yoke piece to be quite as stiff. So although I'm using a semi-lightweight fabric, I'm only going to be interfacing 2 of my yokes. I want a much softer yoke around my neck. But again, that is completely up to you. You're gonna need pattern piece number 5. This is the loop. You're gonna cut 1. You're gonna need pattern piece number 11. This is our leg drawstring, and you're going to cut 2. Now for this pattern, you have the option of using cording or maybe ribbon for the center drawstring, but you also can just cut 2 more of these leg drawstring pattern pieces and make your own tie for your casing. You're gonna need pattern piece number 1. This is our bodice front. Pattern piece number 2, this is our bodice back. And you're gonna need pattern piece number 3 and pattern piece number 10. These are cut out of elastic. Once your pattern pieces are cut and interfaced, we can go ahead and get started. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start with our front bodice piece. You're gonna go ahead and stay stitch along the front. You're also gonna stay stitch around the arm, and you're gonna create 2 rows of gathering stitches along the shoulder between your notches. You're gonna do that for both front pieces. So I like to use my stay stitching as a guide. So I do my stay stitching literally just under 5/8 of an inch. And then I use it as a guide to turn my seam and press, making sure that I'm rolling the stay stitching to the inside so you don't see it on the right side. And then to create my narrow hem, I go ahead and turn the raw edge to the fold line and press. So you're gonna do the same exact thing for your armhole. The only difference is that it has a much greater curve, so I snip into those curves a little bit, and then again, you're just gonna follow your stay stitching line, you're going to press it, and then you're going to turn under to create your narrow hem. Okay, now that you've gone ahead and pressed your narrow hems, you're gonna go ahead and stitch them down. Now for the front, you're gonna stitch the entire way, but for the armhole, you're going to stitch about halfway and then back stitch and stop, cut your thread, and we'll finish off the end further along in the tutorial when we attach our back to front. All right, now that we've created our narrow hems, we're gonna go ahead and work on our loops and our yoke. We're gonna be using the yoke that is interfaced, and you should have 2 markings that were on your pattern piece. Now to make the loop, you simply fold that loop piece in half, right sides facing, stitch and turn them right side out, then you fold it in half, so you end up with 2 loops like you see here. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna place them onto our markings. So I like to actually do this without pinning. I just sort of hold it in place like this, and then I go to my machine and tack it down. Then you're gonna do the same thing with your other loop. You're gonna fold it, bringing your legs together. You're gonna place it on your marking, and you're going to tack it down. Okay, so I have gone ahead and attached my loops to my right yoke, and this is my right side bodice. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna gather this and then with right sides facing, you're gonna go ahead and pin your yoke to your bodice. So your yoke is going to extend 5/8 of an inch. Go ahead and pull some more gathers if you need to. Once you have it pinned, you're gonna go ahead and stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna do this for both sides. Remember that we obviously only have loops on the right side because we're gonna be placing buttons on the left side. All right, so as you can see, I've gone ahead and pressed my seam allowance for my yoke up. Everything is nice and pressed. Now remember, I only chose to interface 2 of my yoke pieces, so that's why this one isn't interfaced. But if you did interface it, then both of yours would be interfaced. You're gonna go ahead and also press up the hem allowance given, which is 5/8 of an inch, and you're going to place these right sides facing. Go ahead and pin. So now we can head to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, and then this opening here we will slip stitch closed at the end. Now I've gone ahead and trimmed my seam allowance down. Then you're going to turn it right side out. Push your corners out. And then you're gonna give this a really good press. Now, as an alternative, if you don't want to slip stitch this closed by hand, you can go ahead, pin it in place, and then on the right side, you can stitch in the ditch, making sure that you're catching the underside. Okay, now you can start to see our bodice taking shape. Now what we're going to do is we're going to overlap our fronts, making sure that we're aligning those notches. Okay, now you can start to see our bodice taking shape. Now we're gonna go ahead and overlap our fronts. We're gonna go ahead and match up our notches. You should have had 2 notches on each of your front pieces. Okay, now let's go ahead and baste this together. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and set our front bodice aside for a second. Go ahead and grab your back piece. Now you're gonna go ahead and press under 7/8 of an inch, and then you're gonna turn under 1/4 of an inch. You can also just serge your edge and fold 7/8 of an inch. I like to make sure that I am doing it evenly from side to side, so I still do a stitching line that's 7/8 of an inch. And just like we did our front bodice, I use it as a guide to turn my hem allowance to 7/8 of an inch. So I've created my stitching line at 7/8 of an inch, and I went ahead and serged because serging gives me 1/4 of an inch, so it's easy for me to turn and press my 7/8 of an inch and then just turn under my serging, right? Because that's 1/4 of an inch, and press. Now that you have it neatly pressed, you're gonna go ahead and stitch close to the edge. All right, so you're gonna go ahead and insert your elastic. Remember that you have a guide for how long your elastic should be. We're using 1/2 inch wide elastic. You're going to enter through one opening through your casing, and then you're going to pull it out the other side and then tack them down. Once you have it tacked down, you're gonna go ahead and pin your side seams. And remember that our armhole already was pressed and we had a crease there, right, from the pressing. So you're gonna place the folded edge of your back piece along that crease, and you're gonna pin. Okay, now make sure that you're opening up that entire seam allowance that we folded, and you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way up. Okay, now that you have your side seam stitch, I went ahead and pressed my seam allowance towards my front, and just following your pressed crease lines, you're just gonna go ahead and bring that down and over, and then on the right side, you're gonna stitch following your existing stitching line until you get to your side seam. Okay, we could go ahead and set our bodice aside for just a minute and grab your casing sections. We're gonna work first with the ones I have marked You don't have to mark your stitching lines on all four because one is on the inside, but this is the one that people are gonna see. The other ones are like your casing facing. So I have already transferred my stitching lines onto my pieces. I've made my markings where I'm gonna make my buttonholes. And I have also placed interfacing on the front where my buttonholes are gonna go. So the first thing you wanna do is go ahead and make your buttonholes. Once you have your buttonholes made, you're going to place these right sides facing, match your side seam notches, and stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so I have attached my side seams. I went ahead and opened my buttonholes and I pressed my seams open. Now you're gonna basically do the same thing for the facing, except you're gonna leave an opening on one side seam between the small dots, okay? So you're going to stitch one whole side, but on the other side, you're going to stitch down to one dot, back stitch, leave an opening, and then start again at the other dot, back stitch, and then continue down to the end. All right, so now what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn your facing to the wrong side like this, and then you're just going to slip it inside of our casing. You want to make sure that you're matching up your side seams, your centers, and then I'm going to go ahead and pin. Now I'm pinning at the top and at the bottom, if you'll notice, because I'm going to go ahead and do these two stitching lines that are above and below my buttonhole, and I don't want my waistband to casing to shift. So that's why I'm pinning both sides. Now, in the instructions, if you are reading them or trying to follow along with them, they have you stitch a scant 5/8 of an inch from the top and then 5/8 of an inch up from the bottom, and that's to help you keep it together, and you are free to do that. But as far as I'm concerned, when I do the two stitching lines in the middle, that creates the middle casing, and when I attach my bodice to the top and my pants to the bottom, it automatically creates those two other casings, so it just seems like less work. I'm gonna match my side seam, and then we'll use this opening later on to insert our elastic and our drawstring. Okay, now that I have it pinned, you're gonna go to your sewing machine and you're just gonna follow the lines, right? You're going to stitch following the two stitching lines that you drew onto your fabric. Okay, so as you can see, I'm done stitching my lines, and on the inside, you'll have 3 little holes, and that's what we're gonna use to insert our elastic. Our drawstring can go through our buttonholes. So what you're gonna do now is you're going to attach this to the bodice, and once we do that, we can move on to the pants. So for me, the easiest way to do it is to find my center front and match it up to the center front. If you, for some reason, did not mark your center front, you can always bring your side seams together and then find the center front and make a little snip, sort of like that. And that'll help you to make sure that you are matching up your center to your center. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin there first. Now I'm gonna go ahead and match up my side seams. And then match up my other side seam. And then pin along the back. Okay, now you're gonna head to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I have finished attaching my casing to my bodice, and I have serged my raw edge and pressed my seams up towards the bodice. We're gonna set this aside and we're gonna start working on our pants. Okay, with right sides facing, you're gonna place one front on top of one back, and we're gonna go ahead and pin the inseam. You're gonna do the same exact thing to your other front and back pant legs. Okay, so once you have them both pinned, you're gonna go ahead and stitch starting at the hem, working your way up towards the crotch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now we're gonna go ahead and pin our pockets to our side seams. So I will usually just pin my pocket and then I serge the entire pant leg and then stitch them together. For me, it just gives me one clean finished serge, and then I just finish off the rest of the pockets. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin, matching those notches. Remember, you have a notch for your pocket. So you wanna make sure that you pin there. It comes all the way up to the waist. Okay, and then you're gonna do the other pocket. Okay, so now you can either just stitch this down right now and then serge after the fact. Some people do it that way. I am gonna go ahead and instead of stitching the pocket down, I'm just gonna serge the entire side seam. I'm gonna do the same thing for this one, and then I'm gonna attach the other remaining pockets to the other pant legs and do the same thing. So I've gone ahead and serged, like you can see, the entire side seam. And now I'm gonna go ahead and fold this pant leg onto itself so right sides are facing. And I'm gonna start pinning at the bottom. So you should have transferred 2 little dots that were on your pattern pieces. This lets you know when you're gonna start and stop so that we leave an opening for the casing that we create at the hem. So I'm gonna actually put my pin there and there where my dots are so that I don't forget. Okay, so now you should also have some markings near your pockets where you're going to start and stop stitching. So I'm gonna go ahead and place them there so I don't forget to start and stop. This leaves an opening for our pocket. So you're gonna start stitching at the hem. You're gonna stitch till you get to your first dot, back stitch, leave this opening open, then stitch again, back stitch at the other dot, work your way up until you get just past your pocket at that first dot, back stitch, break your thread, leave this opening, and then start again at your dot, work your way up to the waist. You're gonna do that for both your pant legs, bringing your front and back together at the side seam. Once you're done doing that, you can go ahead and close out your pocket. Okay, so I have my pant legs sewn and I have my pocket opening. Now on the inside, I just wanted to show you this. So because we have a pocket, I went ahead and pressed my pocket towards the front. I pinned it along the waist because I'm gonna stitch that down, right? So you're just gonna baste your pocket down towards the front. Then I made a small clip into just one side seam so I could press the rest of my seam open because we need to leave this opening for our casing, okay? So now while we have one pant leg right side out and one pant leg wrong side out, I'm gonna go ahead and slip my right side out pant leg inside of this one. I'm gonna match my crotch seams, my inseams. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my inseams. I'm gonna make sure that they're matching up and I'm gonna pin there. And now we're gonna sew our crotch together. Okay, now you're gonna go to the sewing machine. You're gonna stitch your entire crotch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that we have our pant legs sewn together, we can go ahead and attach it to the casing in our bodice. Okay, now that we have our pant legs done, we're gonna go ahead and attach our pant to the bodice. So what I've done is I've turned my bodice wrong side out and the back is facing me. My pants are right side out and I have the back also facing me. I'm literally just gonna slip my pants inside, just like this. I'm gonna pin my side seams. I always like to start at my side seams first. I'm gonna make sure that I pin my crease that I put in the center front of my casing. I'm gonna line that up to my center front seam on my pants. That way I can make sure it's exactly at the center front. And obviously align your notches. Once you're done pinning, you're gonna go ahead and stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, once you have attached your pants to our casing, we're gonna go ahead and insert our elastic. So it's gonna be easier because we're doing 2 rows of elastic at the top and then a drawstring or cording, whatever you've chosen to use for the middle. It's so much easier to sift your elastics through at the same time as opposed to trying to do one at a time and then doing that last one with your fabric sort of already bunched up. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a pin, safety pin through both of my elastics. And then remember that we're working from the inside because that's where we have that opening on the side seam. So I'm gonna put both of them in at the same time. And then the cording is easy because it's just fabric or cord, so it's gonna go through much easier than if you were trying to do your elastics. So you're just literally going to do a bit at a time on each side. You're gonna do this until you come all the way around, right, to the opening again. But make sure that when you start getting close to the end, that you don't let the ends of these go inside the casing. So when you get close and there's maybe just an inch or so out, I like to pin it so that I don't lose it. All right, so I got both of my rows of elastic out. I'm gonna go ahead and overlap them by about 3/8 of an inch and stitch them together. And then you can go ahead and insert your drawstring, or if you made yourself a drawstring like I did, through the buttonhole openings. All right, so I have inserted my elastics and my cording, and there's only a couple things left to do. So we're gonna go ahead and work on the hem. So I went ahead and pressed the seam allowance, or the hem allowance, I should say. I took a little bit more because I'm short. So I took a little bit more of a hem allowance for myself. So I also decided that I want to do an elastic casing for my pant leg instead of having the drawstring. So if you are doing the drawstring, then you have an opening in your side seam. I went ahead and closed mine. You're going to take your drawstrings, fold them in half, stitch them, leaving an opening, turn them right side out. And what you're gonna do first is you're going to sew your hem all the way around. So whatever that hem allowance you took, if you took the same as indicated on the pattern or if you needed more, then you're gonna go ahead and stitch close to that edge. You're going to pull your drawstring in through the opening and out through the opening, just like we did with the drawstring and the buttonholes. If you wanna do elastic like I'm doing, it's even easier because you're just going to stitch your hem down, leaving a small opening. I leave the opening on my inseam, and then I'm gonna put my elastic through, and just like we did for our waist casing, I'm gonna overlap them, stitch them down, and then that's all that there is for the hem. So all that's left for you to do is to do some hand sewing. So you're gonna hand stitch the openings that we left for our casings, and then pick some really cute buttons for the back and hand sew them on, and you are all done.